Cassie.
Nick.
What's up? Do you remember a time when we were the only ones in franchising that did this?
I do. Such trailblazers.
I'm not going to call them copycats, but there are some new shows popping up. I mean, it's all good, but we like competition for our 6 viewers.
They're ours. Back off.
They're ours. Stay away. The podcast Wars of Franchising begins this week on Live to Tell. So we're adjusting the format slightly this week to try to give you more specifics to franchising. Generally speaking, what we tried doing is making the podcast more about news and applying it back to franchising. But long term, we'll see what happens. We got some big things in store for what's coming up on our podcast network. So we're going to adjust it a little bit. So first thing first, we're talking about 1851 stories. What's on our site? What's important to you?
Yeah. So what's important to me this week, the article that stood out to me the most was the pros and cons of working with franchise brokers. Because obviously when I'm talking to my clients, when I'm talking to people just in the industry, brokers are obviously a topic that comes up time and time again. But I think, and you and I have talked about this at great length, but I think that at some point that bubble is going to burst when the candidate starts understanding where the broker fee is coming from and how that might be swaying the decision-making process on their end that they might not be considering.
Is that the buyer beware stories or another story?
This is a separate story itself that's straight up the pros and cons of working with a franchise
covered
broker.
It twice. I mean, we're putting out so much content, it's hard to follow along. But okay, so on the broker, because the story that I want to talk about was buyer beware, what to know about the business of franchise portals and brokers, which we can get to in a second. There are companies like FranNet that are at least starting the discussion on transparency, and they have their code of ethics, which I think is a smart move because ultimately I think the whole franchise industry should be warned that as long as you are being front facing with the information that fee that you just collected from the franchise buyer is being packaged up and handing off to the franchise broker, I think you're fine. You're using brokers the right way. There are brokers that exist out there. You can read the content on LinkedIn that I can coach you into your next opportunity. Well, that means sell you into the right opportunity. They can be coaching you on what franchising is, but when you're sold into your next opportunity, it's a different experience. So the buyer just needs to understand what is the role of the broker, and the broker's job is to introduce you to the right brands that might fit, but also understanding that the broker is not going to give you the right brand. They're going to give you the right brand within their portfolio. So, overarching comment would be, I feel like more transparency is going to be involved in this process, either because it's forced, because franchisees that bought the wrong brand bond together and attack franchising, or because we just decide that it's the right thing to do. And let's start off a relationship in a transparent way.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to your column from a few weeks ago. It's getting harder and harder to lie in today's day and age because A, people are getting smarter. B, the information is out there, whether it's on a Glassdoor or a LinkedIn, or there's straight up data through analytics. There needs to be that layer of transparency there because otherwise people aren't going to want to work with you.
Yeah, right.
Cool.
Yeah, good stories. And lastly on that, because we did touch on the portals for the buyer, just so you know, those are basically like databases of franchise opportunities. But again, understand that database is only as good as the brands that pay to be in that database. So there are companies that are adjacent. So if I'm a buyer, I'm thinking about buying a franchise in 2020, what I would recommend is first figure out financially what can you afford. That will now open up categories. Second, write down some things that you're passionate about. So you want to own a restaurant, but you only have $200,000. It might not line up exactly. Maybe you could buy like a macaron business. Maybe there are things that are a little bit lower investment that are more kiosk based that might help align your passions. But figure out financially how much you got, figure out what your passions are, and then do a digest, your own digest around the web. Certainly use the portals as a part of your process for figuring out what exists, and then don't buy anything without trying it. Because if you don't believe and you're not excited about it, your sales process won't be excited about it. The return won't be excited about it. So understand that the tools that exist, including news outlets, including 1851. We're here to give you as much of a glimpse as we can. On the main site, where the articles that Cassie and I are referencing, there's no financial amount in exchange for content on our site. So we try to do a wide scope. There are some PR agencies that block us from talking to their clients because they feel threatened by our business. But we try to give you a scope of everything that's out there as much as we can find it. But we also have our brand side, which we're going to talk about in a second, that you have to pay to be a part of, and that's disclosed. If you see at the top of an article sponsored, or you see the logo in the upper left corner that says news brought to you or powered by 1851 with a brand logo, those are things that the brand has invested in. But again, there's tons of information out there. It's just cutting the cards and figuring out what best aligns with you.
Couldn't have said it better.
I feel like I already heated up. I could tell that, like, I bet you my heart rate just increased on that one. But all right, franchise news. What we got from an ag standpoint?
So the one that I can't get over this week is, and we've talked about this a little bit before in terms of how companies are trying to combat horrible turnover, especially in industries like QSR. But Taco Bell is going to start testing out offering their managers 6 figures in order to get them to stay on board. So they're going to start testing it at corporately owned locations this year. Right now, managers across their system are typically making somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000. That's wild to me that you could be working as a Taco Bell manager and bringing home $100,000.
Yeah. So, and you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. My belief is, and I've had this discussion with a few restaurant brands. I'm like, all right, so you pay someone, for argument's sake, $15, and then they go and take a job at another restaurant for $15.25. And then they come back to you at $15.50. Let's just say that's kind of the life cycle of someone that would work in a QSR brand, or the career cycle. The reality is, if you would have just paid them the higher amount in the first place, you wouldn't have had to go find people. And when you start putting in the cost that it takes to go find great talent, it is significant. So if brands take those funds and say, in order to keep great people, let's just cut to the chase and pay people what they want to make, then all of a sudden you solve some of those challenges. It's certainly a mentality that we think about in our organization, that if somehow you can get to equal on the salary side, then you win. And if you look at total investment, the truth is, Taco Bell coming out with that news, if they're paying $100,000, they still feel like they're getting significant value at that mark. That means historically they've been getting significant value out of the GMs that are operating multi-million-dollar stores, but they weren't paying them in line with what they should. And rather than losing that great GM who has created a multi-million-dollar store to another organization, they're saying, let's hit the mark that will make that discussion stop. It is not easy to be in the restaurant business. You smell like shit when you leave it there every day. It is all day on your feet. Your customers are dickheads. So there's a lot that goes against that. And I think Taco Bell's smart by saying, historically, these positions have not been paid what they are testing now. What happens when we pay these folks the right amount, so that at least when they go home at the end of the day, they're not worried about their finances? So I think it's a smart PR story, and philosophically, it's smart for their employee base.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know how many ag we're going to be chatting about in terms of franchise news, but it kind of goes into this overarching topic of how brands are combating this issue. But McDonald's is another one, not on the salary side, but they rolled out a new app that's designed to help their employees map out their career path. So it's called Archway to Careers. So it's, I mean, if you're not doing that now and you're someone that's going into that line of business, I feel like it's something that people are going to be looking for, and otherwise you're behind.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to bring huge technology to solve that gap. So no, I think it's smart. I think every brand needs to be thinking about, when you find amazing talent. This is any business. When you find amazing talent, how do you keep them? How do you hold them accountable against your standards? And then what does winning look like on both sides? Because when you have those conversations, you're going to figure out a pathway to success. So.
Totally.
But anybody that wants to read more on hashtag franchise news, if you scroll down on the main site or on mobile, you'll see hashtag franchise news. Basically, that's us looking around the web and pulling stories that have been posted in other publications and putting a spin on it to make sure that's franchise specific. So that's updated very regularly. Just go ahead and scroll down on your screen and you'll be able to find it. Or go on to 1851franchise.com. All right, power rankings.
Power ranking.
So this is the first time that we're really diving into this, and we're going to get into trying to pick some of the things that are happening in here, just like sports teams do. Our power rankings, if you look if you're on desktop, you look upstairs, you'll see power rankings at the top, and you click on it. It'll give you an idea of brands that are trending well within our site. Now, there's in full transparency, there's a few ways that the content trends. It's either are people sharing and engaging with their content, and that's really read through some of the social outlets. Are they creating digital campaigns to create more exposure for their brands? How are the organic reads doing? So we have an algorithm that basically takes a collective of that data and says, here's how you rank. So this week, for January 19th through the 25th, so last week, Eggs Up Grill held the number one spot. And so if you look there, they went up from number 3 to number 1 over the course of the week. If you looked in the main site and look down at trending brand buzz, you'll see that a bunch of their content is rolling the right way. But Eggs Up 1, Big Blue Swim School 2, Sylvan Learning 3, Amazing Lash 4, and Fuzzy's Taco Shop 5. Those are the top 5, and you can keep scrolling through to see how our brands behaving. And it's interesting because some of the brands that are on there don't have huge digital campaigns. That just means that their content is really resonating with an audience. So it gives you an idea of what categories are also connecting with the franchise universe. And I'm sure we'll dive into that more in future weeks. But Cassie, any comments on power rankings?
I like kind of your mention of, you don't necessarily need to be spending huge digital campaigns against your content to have it be resonating. I mean, obviously there's an infinite amount of content that lives on the internet right now, and it helps to have those campaigns behind it. But if you're creating content, you're not doing anything with it, it's not going to do anything for you. So even if you're sharing it organically and you don't have a big budget to put behind it, the more you're able to get it out there, it's still possible that it can shoot up to the top.
I love that you said that, because we talk about this from a PR standpoint, that these brands go out there and get all this press, and then it sits on a website. And if you ask them, are you satisfied with what your PR agency was able to do? Most of them say, I mean, it was good for a while. We got a bunch of press, but then no. And that creates a gap that PR agencies could actually solve if they use their brains to say, all right, we've built all these stories. Now let's go do something with it. If you just look at fundamental storytelling, say a children's book, Goodnight Moon is written, it goes into a bookstore, that story is done. There's your PR hit. Now, what do you do with that? You try to get that in people's hands. You leverage good reviews. You have parents reading it to children, and it exposes that story across many areas. So in my belief, it's not necessarily where the story gets told. Is it a good story, and does it resonate with an audience? And therefore, what you were just talking about, Cassie, that ends up having impact on what drives people forward.
Exactly.
So what did I write about this week for heating up?
I was cracking up reading this column just because the analogy was, it's like so good throughout, and it feels like the start of a poem, but franchisees are like vegetables.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
There
that.
was one sentence that really had me cracking up. I'll have to find it while you're doing your whole heating up spiel, but I love the analogy. It's great.
Keep giving me some insights in here. Do you have the article up?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
So,
read through some of it because I think you can guide some of the analogies that exist.
okay. So you're talking about the fact is a franchise brand. A franchisee is like a vegetable. You might not necessarily want it. It might not be your favorite thing in the world, but you need it and you know that it's good for you. So you need health benefits, nutrients, and then you need them to like have a life essentially. So health benefits, you're talking about the finances that they're bringing in. It's undeniable that what franchisees are bringing to the table is money to continue to fuel your business. Nutrients, the royalties that you're getting, that's how you're going to continue over time collecting in on that investment that they're making. And, you know, you need to have knowledge of the benefit that they're going to bring. And even though there are instances in which they might be trying to do something more innovative, or they might be a little bit too entrepreneurial for your taste, they want to, you know, kind of grow outside of what your strict model is. At the end of the day, if you're a franchisor and you don't have franchisees, then are you really a franchise? So it's kind of like, suck it up, eat the vegetables on your plate.
All right, to be clear, these vegan restaurants that are popping up, or even burger restaurants, like they're taking vegetables and turning them into meat. So that means nobody really likes vegetables because you're disguising them as other things. All right, but if you said do you want to eat a burger? Or you want to eat a vegetable? Like of course a burger or a pizza or whatever,
Burger.
right?
Yeah.
So franchisees as a theme. It's something that you can see it on franchisors' faces. They're just constantly annoyed. And you can also see it on franchisees' faces. They would say franchisors are like vegetables too. So it's this like love-hate relationship that exists. But without each other, brands don't scale and brands don't get to these crazy multiples that private equity firms are willing to pay for them. So you need vegetables to succeed. You need franchisees to succeed, and you need those vegetables to succeed. You don't want to eat some rotten vegetables because the rotten vegetables kill your system as well. So my analogy was meant to make people smile about it, but it's also to say, figure out a way to work together. Figure out a way how this all dials in as a part of a complete balanced diet, whatever that means. I'm not even angry about it, though.
Yeah.
It kind of is what it is.
It's true. Well, and you can also, I mean, this is my favorite sentence. I have to read it because it literally is my favorite thing. Have you ever said no to a financially qualified vegetable who just doesn't fit in the right personality to make it in your franchise salad? Like, you also can say no if it's a bad vegetable for you. You have that ability, and you should. Like, a financially qualified vegetable is going to be something that plays on my head when I'm now thinking of franchising.
I swear on everything franchising that there were no drugs or booze involved in the writing of that column.
Even though you did say that vegetables are magical, which I was like, mushrooms?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair ask. Was Nick on mushrooms when writing this column? Now, if you want to give me a ticket for filming while going through the New Jersey toll system, I understand that part. But no, there were no mushrooms. But imagine if people did mushrooms and then wanted to talk about franchising.
I feel like our viewers are all people in that category.
I tend to agree with that. Well, again, there are promises being made, and when promises are made on a podcast, that means we have to keep them.
Yeah.
So there are more changes coming up here, and we look forward to giving them to you. We out.
Bye.
Franchisees are vegetables like soup.